Usually when great stories get started, it all comes from the behind the scenes work. And that's what happened with this story here that I'm going to tell you about today with Jacob's Ladder. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia. We're outside of Atlanta, really in Roswell, Georgia, with an amazing, incredible person named Amy Odell. And she's the director, the leader, I would say the one in charge here for Jacob's Ladder, which is an incredible place that meets the needs of special needs people. How are you doing?
Doing great.
I gotta tell you, I've enjoyed the background work here. I mean, and we walked around today. I would tell
Yeah.
anyone if they're ever in the Atlanta area to get by here and come take a look because what God has done here
Mm.
has been amazing.
Mhm.
Tell me your story, Amy. You started as a single mom
Mhm.
26 years ago on this
Mhm.
journey of going,
Mhm.
I want to meet the needs of special needs people. And
Mhm.
in full disclosure, I've had
Mhm.
some friends who've gone through
Mhm.
here and
Mhm.
they've been big fans.
Mm.
How did God get this started?
Okay, so our story, and when I get to
Mm,
ask that question, it's a funny experience because I start to see like a little movie reel through my mind of different moments in time,
wow,
if that makes sense.
it
And
does.
so uh, I, as you said, found myself as a single mother. I have a daughter who's about 3 years older than Jacob. Her name is
Mm,
Aubrey. When Jacob came along, he had some significant developmental
yeah.
delays. His diagnosis was PDD-NOS, which means pervasive developmental delay with no known origin. And
Mm,
you and I talked a little bit beforehand just about what some of that time was like. But one of the things that I really learned that has served me over the last 28 years in this work is, he didn't give me a child. The Lord didn't give me a child that
mm,
had one specific diagnosis. PDD really means there's
yeah.
this pervasive element to a developmental delay. And at the time, of course, that felt super scary and overwhelming. But the thing I knew about Jacob is that he had this beautiful heart and this beautiful spirit. And there were times, even though there were times where he looked very incapable, there were these moments of just clarity where you could absolutely see
Mm,
who he was and the potential that he had. And I just developed this hunger, I guess you would say, to figure out a way to pull that part forward and give it all that it needed and to nourish that. What I found back 28 years ago is that it's very hard to find that help and that encouragement. I
yeah.
think today in our society, the way that we deal with people with many medical issues, but certainly with people who have some neurological or neurodevelopmental complications, is that we test and we diagnose and we do a little bit of intervention here and there.
Mm,
But in terms of an all encompassing, holistic model of care, that did not exist when I had mine, right? Not when
wow.
it was not there for
So when
Jacob.
you walked in the middle of this as a parent, as a
Mm-hmm.
young parent, going,
Mm-hmm.
okay, how am I going to meet the holistic
Mm-hmm.
behavior
Mm-hmm.
balance of your
Mm-hmm.
son Jacob?
Mm-hmm.
It birthed this movement in you, and now
Mm-hmm.
here we sit on 15
Mm-hmm.
acres of beautiful land, and there are other campuses also.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through, like, what did that feel like? How did God help you walk through those steps to take a look at special needs in a holistic viewpoint?
Perfect. Yes. So I would say, in all honesty, when I was just completely immersed in it with Jacob, it was pretty much survival mode. Like I've got this little.
Yeah,
Sometimes I use the term like child with this brokenness, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense because we all have our
yeah,
brokenness. It just shows up in different way for all of us, and his just showed up in the way that it showed up. And so he had to work so hard to just learn the basic skills of
mm,
life: sitting up, rolling over, balancing himself, learning to walk, learning to speak, learning to think, learning to use his vision. He had cortical visual impairment, which means the eyes are basically okay, but the brain doesn't process the incoming
wow,
visual information. So when I say we had to dive in and build a foundation for all of these components, I mean, we really had to do that one thing at a time. And I wasn't thinking back then, how do I build a holistic model? I was thinking, Lord God, help us survive and help us
just get through.
get through
Yeah.
with momentum forward. That's all I cared about. Like, which is why Jacob's ladder, the ladder, one step at a time. God's providential care over the process, but you can only walk it out one step at a time. And so, as I was walking that out with Him one step at a time, in God's great providential care, what I learned in day 1 of the journey, what I learned in day 30 of the journey, what I learned in year 15 of the journey, every day, and it's not just every day, every moment in every day taught me.
So Jacob's ladder grew along with Jacob.
Absolutely, 100%.
Wow.
100%. And what I love about that is,
Oh,
it was about Jacob's healing process, but I would also say that it was my own healing process. I've always been a believer. I was raised in a believing home, right? But it's one thing to be a believer, and it's another thing to have the kind of relationship with Christ where your situation might be so difficult that you sort of fall into, well, my goodness, I need so much. I got to live in surrender. I got to
yeah.
live in faith because I don't really have another option. And then when I did that out of necessity, because my pride and my own capability wasn't going to move the dial the way that I
That we
needed.
want it to move, oftentimes about the
That's
work of
right.
God in our lives.
That's
Yeah.
right. So sometimes you learn the hard way,
Been there, Amy. Been there a couple times, or two, or maybe 10, or more. Yes.
So that's been the most amazing part
Mm.
is honestly learning what surrender means, and then watching what occurred. So you mentioned we now have 15 acres, and we have the second campus, and we have these multiple 7 or 8 buildings on campus, and each one has a different program, and we have 150, 160 staff, and we serve a lot of children. We've met 4,000 children I have over the years, and learned so much of those stories and the family and walking them through it. How could that possibly, I look back and go, how could this possibly be our lives now based on when we had no income, single parent, trying to survive, just trying to figure
Yeah,
out his
in
next
your
step?
story, you said to me that there was nothing.
Nothing.
There was no credit card.
There was
There was
nothing.
nothing
No.
there. And now, which is why I would tell anyone who's in the Atlanta area to come take a stop by
Yeah.
if they can get in, is
Yeah.
because God has done some amazing things in
Yeah.
dealing with, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful, with one of the hardest people groups,
It's true.
special needs people.
It's true.
I mean, is that what gets you up and motivated every day in doing this?
You know what I love is every day that
Huh.
a new student, a new family walks through the doors. It is like I just right before I met you in the lobby today. There's this precious young man. He's I think 20 years old, and he came to us from public school, where he was having the most difficult time. A lot of severe behavior, a lot of aggression, a lot of destruction. We evaluated him. We knew what the risks were. He had this beautiful mom and dad who just absolutely just grabbed my
They're all
heart,
in.
and I love them. Still do to this day. We've served him about 4 or 5 years. But I just met him in the lobby, and to see that child transform, right? So when you meet him, and I'll just use him as an example, that really personifies all the other people that are unnamed that I've never met, that many people try to help. But when you look at the complexity in one individual, there is not one outside of what we're doing, because, and I am very biased. I love what we do very, very much. But typically in our society now, we tend to stigmatize and identify and diagnose without taking all aspects of that individual into
And that's
consideration.
what's unique about Jacob's Ladder, is that it looks at a holistic viewpoint.
That's right.
Can you break that down for us on
Sure.
what that looks like?
Absolutely. We have called our model of care the interpersonal whole brain model of care. And so if you look at the symbol that is our brand, right at the center of this circle is a heart, a little red heart,
Yeah.
and it's the acknowledgement of the soul and the heart and the will
Because we
of an
all come with
individual.
one.
We all have it.
We all have it.
And sometimes it gets buried and it doesn't get identified or spoken to very often. But I would tell you that in the time I've worked with kids, and I reflect back on my time with Jacob, and we train our staff to know this is truth, that when you've got another human being sitting in front of you, and it happens to be a child or a student or a young adult that we serve, the very first thing you do is pouring out of yourself to connect with the heart of that other individual. And I quote a study that I found years and years ago. I used to talk about in seminars where they took individual heart cells and put it in a petri dish. Heart cells here, had it laying out on a counter in a lab. And what they found is that the heart cells individually have their own little internal brain that keeps them beating outside the body. But here was the most magnificent thing, is that they had one petri dish and they brought another petri dish in that was beating at its own rhythm. But when they put those petri dishes side by side, without any connection or a brain regulating it, those heart cells from different people, from different dishes, started to beat in unison. And when I saw that, it said everything to me, because I had the experience of sitting in front of Jacob when he was cortically visually impaired and he couldn't process and his sensory system was overloaded and it was hard for him to sit upright without falling over. And there was something in me that had to connect with something in him to pull him forward. And it was that exchange of the deepest part of ourselves, right, that invest in another person to walk alongside them to the next point in like
No matter
the
where they're
healing.
at in life.
No matter, it doesn't matter if it's addiction. It doesn't matter if it's, we're talking about special needs. It doesn't matter if it's anxiety and depression. It's like there's something in us that will move towards healing if the body and the soul and the mind of the person is given what it needs. And if there's another person that just unabashedly loves and cares about them,
They can connect.
They can connect. And then that exchange of the giving process and the healing process. So what we say at Jacob's Ladder is we are the balance of science and love, the union of science and love. And so the love component, the relationship, the acknowledgement of the soul and the will and the heart of the other person, paired with 26 years of very scientific work, breaking down the brain and the neurological system.
And you can't have one without the other. You can't have love without the science, and science without the love, because they both feed off each other.
It happens right there in treatment, right? I mean, there's some really loving people that would love to move the dial in health and healing for people. And then there's clinics and institutions all over the world that are trying to do the scientific model without the care and the compassion. And I would argue that there's value here, but when you bring the best of both of those worlds together and unite them, and that is your delivery of care, then you've done what we've been intended to do.
Wow, that you would say that the Holy Spirit has intended us to do.
That's what I say.
Wow. Can we talk about the church?
Yes.
I mean, in every church, there are people who are in these churches with special needs issues and problems, and they come with families. How can we do a better job as a church? How can we improve?
Yeah. So one of the things that I love about the interpersonal whole brain model of care, and you asked me to kind of walk through that, and I went off on a
No, that's fine.
But what I love about that is, if a hospital wanted to utilize it, they could. If a church wanted to utilize it, they could. If a school system wanted to utilize it, they could. And the reason that I think it has such wide application is that it starts with the center of the heart and soul of the person, and then it looks at the neurological truths of that person.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit earlier about the brain mapping that we do, and actually seeing the connection points within the brain and what's overly connected and underconnected. That's the neurological and the neurodevelopmental. But then we look at the social and emotional and behavioral aspects of that human being. And then the physiological, which is how healthy are they? How's their immune system? How's their energy? What's their diet? Do they get out and exercise? Do they get enough sunlight? And then we look at the learning, like the learning style. Everybody can learn, but it's like, how do you receive and process and use information? And then there's another ring beyond that. That's, what is the social structure of support? What's there? What's working? What's not working? What's needed? And then when you encapsulate that all, right, in the union of the science and love in a delivery model, then if it's a church, then our great wish would be that we could, whomever it is within the church that's serving people with special needs, and especially children who are in need of like a foster care situation or adoptive family who have a
Yeah.
history of trauma and abuse, which, by the way, is not a behavior. It's not that they have behavior issues, it's that their brain has been changed structurally by what they've experienced,
Wow.
and they're living that out. And so, in order for someone to invest in that child's life who is a foster care or in need of adoptive home, if we don't get real about what that really means in terms of what's happened with the soul, the spirit, the neurology, the health, the relationship and attachment factors, if we don't get real honest about that, I feel that when we then encourage people to foster and adopt without equipping them,
Without having that. Yeah.
to what it's really going to mean to be successful, that we're doing a disservice in a mighty way. And I have a great passion around how do you shift that conversation? How do you give these tools? How do you create, how do you share the methods that we've worked on? And not that it's about us, but it's about, wow, if there's a model of care that has learned away over many, many years of trial and error and hard work and perseverance to peel this back in every way and then put together a system that allows you to see the individual for who they are. I always say we're not a model that brings a kid in and fits it into the model.
Yeah.
We're a model that says hello to a child and a family, gets to know them at the deepest level in a very systematic, holistic, relationship oriented way. And then, based on all the truths that emerge, we take all that we know from our model and 3,000 plus interventions and say, we believe that you would benefit from this. And what your plan looks like is very different than anybody else's plan because you're very different than anybody else.
Yeah.
Right?
Which what makes this model so beautiful, I think, Amy.
That's how I feel, but I'm very biased, as I
Yeah,
say.
and I can see why, Amy, having walked around here with you, and even during our taping here, we've had people who've been coming and walking by, which
Yeah.
has been so beautiful
Yeah.
because I always love saying on the other side of our obedience, man,
Yeah.
it's a great reward. And
Yeah.
the reward here is seeing the people
Yeah.
that I've gotten to encounter
Yeah.
today. Last question. What motivates you with this, Amy? I mean, we can be honest with one another.
Yeah.
Meeting the needs of special needs people is hard.
Yeah.
93%, I've been told, of most families, most marriages end in divorce with special needs kids. Man, what hope would you give to those people? And what gets you motivated about
Yeah.
this?
So if you had asked me that question 5 years ago, 10 years ago, my answer would be different. Today, I think there would be really two things. One, every time I meet a new child, well, I think there's three things. I meet a new child and I see Jacob every time. And I know what I found to be possible for him because after all of the difficulty, he's one of the most amazing.
And he works here too,
He works
by
here
the
as
way.
a teacher, and
Yeah.
he's one of the most gifted teachers. He just has a knack for it. He connects. He can do the work in such a beautiful way. And so I think every kid that I see, I look through those eyes and I know what's possible. And then I have this like yearning, burning in my heart to make sure that, my goodness, if they've been brought here, we're going to walk this out with the same intensity that I did for him and see what happens on the other side. So that's really critical to me. I also find great joy, and it gives me great meaning in my life to have young professionals come here hungry to make a difference and to know that what they're learning is going to impact other people's lives who need it so desperately. So it's not just that we're impacting the people in the special
People want
needs
to work
community.
here.
They want to
Yeah.
work here. And even though it is hard work, there's an impact on the other side that they're responsible for. And I love knowing that we have an opportunity to invest in this generation of people who want to help heal and teach and rehabilitate others. So that is super energizing for me. And then the part that would be my answer now at this stage in my life, is that there has been a lot of out of the part about surrendering your life in faith. Like sometimes I feel like my life, I've always had one foot over the ledge, so to speak. Like you're on a cliff and at least your big toes hanging off, because you just don't know what the next piece is going to bring. Like,
Yeah.
how are you going to be provided for? How are you going to make this piece happen? That's a vision that's in your heart, and you can't imagine how it's going to happen. And then Almighty God sweeps in the most amazing ways, and then that next piece unfolds, and all you did was stand and wait in obedience, right? To just see that happen. And that's something you can't really convey. I can't do justice to that. All I can say is that I've had that experience over and over and over. And now what I believe is that that's part of what I want to share, is that the love of the Father and how that shows up in our lives. And it's different for different people, but how it showed up in my life is something I just hope in some point in my life in the future, I can put it into words to do justice to what God has done.
To tell people to take
To
that step.
take the leap,
Go
live
ahead
in
and do it.
faith. When you're scared, take the step anyway. Listen, and the Holy Spirit will guide you. When you don't have the answer, or when you don't know where your sustenance is going to come from, it comes.
Wow. Well, anyway, I got to tell you, this has been beautiful.
I appreciate the
Man,
time. So
thank you
wonderful.
for taking the step, for taking that leap. I think our world's better for it.
Thank you, Mama.
Thank you so
It's
much.
been a privilege to be with you.
I've
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.